Hey guys, welcome to my Picoscope Automotive Basics Part 2 video. I'll put a link in here for Part 1 for those of you that haven't seen it. In this Part 2 video, what I want to cover with you is time base, sampling, and the waveform buffer. So let's start with the waveform buffer. The waveform buffer is simply a recording. We've talked about this, I've talked about this many times in my videos. Hey, let's go back in the buffer and take a look at this signal, see what it looks like. So it would be a recording of events that we have captured. And there are limitations to this buffer. With the Pico, we're talking about 32 million samples. We can record 32 million samples in this waveform buffer. And that's this number up here. If you look at this 31 that's here, if I hit stop on the recording and hit start, it resets the buffer and you can see those numbers counting up. And what we're looking at would be 31 frames recorded. The last frame would be the live one. That would be 32 million samples. It's 32 million samples because I'm set at a 1 mega sample setting. So 1 million samples on this particular screen. Each screen would be 1 million samples, 31 in memory, that's 31 million, and then the final one that we're looking at right here, there's our 32 million frames in our buffer. Watch what happens when I double this sample rate. So if I go to 2 mega samples, that would be 2 million samples on this screen. Watch the waveform buffer. We only went to 15 this time. Why is that? Well, we went to 15, do your math, 2 million per screen. I have 15 screens, 15 frames times 2, that's 30 million. And then again, the last frame we're looking at, I'm sampling it 2 million times. There's your 32 million. So right away we can see that changing the sample rate can affect this waveform buffer. 32 million is the maximum. There's also settings in here that will limit it. So if I drop this down to say, let's go down to 10 ks, which would be 10,000 times per second. Why am I still only counting to 32? Well, there's limits set in the tool. If we go to Tools and go to Preferences, you can see right here the maximum number of waveforms, the default for the Pico is 32. Think about this, guys. Do your math. I'm not going to do it here for you. If you have 10,000 samples per screen and only 32 screens or frames, that's way less than 32 million. Why are we only getting 32? Because the waveform buffer maximum is set. I can set this higher if I want to. Let's set it to 50. Will I get 50 frames? Apply. Okay. Let's watch it. I can get 50 now. Why can I get 50? Because my sample rate is lower and I'm not filling up this waveform buffer with the samples. I'm really limiting it with my top number. This 50 frames is what's limiting it, not the amount of samples. Now watch this. I'll leave this at 50. So my settings, Tools, Preferences, I'm still at 50. If I set this back to my 1 million sample screen, we should get 50, right? We're not going to get 50, watch it. Still only get 32 frames. Why? 32 million is the maximum in the buffer. What would be the application of what I just showed you? If you wanted to have more events, more of a recording, you can change this maximum number of waveforms in here, but you'll have to lower your sample rate to do it. And that may or may not be good. So what happens if I set this to a higher number? Let's go 4 million samples. Let's take a look at it. What do we see? We see 7 frames in the buffer. So do you understand high sample rates will eat this buffer up? So now we need to balance all of this. We need to balance it with time-based settings and how much sampling we need. Is there such thing as oversampling a signal? Too much of a sample? And the answer is yes. do we really need to sample the signal at that particular interval? There might be, let me give you an illustration. I'll try this. I don't know how well it will work. Let's say we're looking at a fuel injector, and we're looking at just a voltage waveform of this fuel injector. And a typical injector would look something like that. Let's say that the sampling of this scope, that we were sampling the signal, like my green dots will represent the sample rate of the scope. What's that going to look like when we draw it? Exactly what we see here. The interval in between these green dots are close enough that I'm not going to miss any of this signal. So each dot would represent a sample. And so I see every bit of this signal that I've drawn here. I don't miss any of it. What happens if my sample rate is, let's draw the green dots a lot further apart. What does this signal look like if that is my sample rate? See if I can draw it for you. I'll go different color. Sample it here, connect the dots. That's what we're going to do. What happens at this point? I think I drew that right. A voltage rise, we have a voltage drop here. We sampled it over here. We missed the event. We sampled it here. So what happens? We draw a line between those two sample points. We're good down low, but what happens here? We have a voltage rise that has occurred between this sample point and this one. And I probably drew that a little bit off because I probably would have caught the top half of that. This would really be maybe more accurately up here and then a little slope down here. But you get the idea that we missed a whole bunch of this waveform. Sample rate is really important. What about sampling this signal more than what I have on this green trace? So imagine this. Imagine sampling, say, this point here 20 times. Would you need to? It would be, sampling it once, say here, and then sampling it again here. That would be good. We're not going to miss anything. And then here again, we're not going to miss anything. Why would I want to sample that one dot 20 different times? You wouldn't. And all you're going to do is you're going to eat up your waveform buffer, and then you're also going to make your files very large. So if you guys are sharing files with each other, emailing pictures to each other, the maximum amount on a typical email is 25 megabytes. Your files are going to be too large to send to your friend because your sample rate was too high. So, things we need to look for. Okay, now let's talk about the time and how the time relates to this. And I think the best thing that I can do is show you a live coil firing event. I have a vehicle in here and it's set up for that. Let's see if I can introduce the time part for you first. Our time, this 5 milliseconds per division, is my setting right now. Let me drop my sample rate back to this 1 megasample setting. And by the way, on the Pico, it's a pretty good default. In fact, when you load the tool, it's set at 1 million samples. That's the default setting. For the most part, you're going to be fine leaving this one alone. There are times we want to play around with it, but back to this time base, 5 milliseconds per division. We have an interval right here where we're looking at a 50 millisecond screen. Okay, 5 milliseconds per division, 50 millisecond screen. There are 10 divisions. If you don't like the scope that way, we can change it. That's under our preferences too. We can select total collected time, and you can see that we're still on a 50 millisecond screen, but we're 50 milliseconds now up top. Take your pick. I'm going to go back to the default. It's what I've been using on the scope forever. 5 milliseconds per division, 50 millisecond screen. Check out my sample interval. So this would be the time between samples on this particular screen. We're talking about, say, a sample here and a sample here and measuring time between the two, okay? It is 50 nanoseconds. That's really fast. 50 nanoseconds right there. Sample interval is 50 nanoseconds. Watch what happens to the interval when I increase my time base. I'm not going to increase my sample rate. I'm just increasing the time base. I'm going to go to 50 milliseconds per division on a 500 millisecond screen. We're now at 500 nanoseconds of interval. I know you're thinking nanoseconds, that's really fast. Well, it is, and that's why we default this on 1 million samples. We still have a great amount of sampling taking place even on this longer time base. Let's go even higher. Let's go 500 milliseconds. And now I'm at 5 microseconds per division. So here's what we just learned. When we increase the time base, we actually increase the sample interval. And if you think about that, we can miss events with longer time bases if we don't consider that. So what is good at a lower time base, what may give you a good signal at a lower time base, may not give you a good signal at a higher time base if your sample rate isn't set right. So I'm going to intentionally lower this and show you that. I'm going to go down to 10,000 samples, 10 KS, kilosamples, 10,000, and I'm going to drop this down to, I don't know, let's go 5 milliseconds. And let me show you how I'm connected to the car. It is in fact, I'll put it right there. What you're looking at is the blue channel. Channel A is connected to a ignition coil, and it is a coil over plug design. The transistor is not inside the coil. We're actually looking at coil primary here, and I'll show you a picture now. The scope, you can see, take a look right here. The attenuator is set up because this thing spikes over 100 volts and I want to protect my scope. So that's the setup. I'm going to start the car, let you see the waveform. Something else that I missed is I previously told my scope what I was using, which is this 20-to-1 attenuator. So for those of you that maybe didn't see the part 1, this is the setup for that. And I'm going to change my scales. You can see that it's going off the screen. So I want to increase my voltage scale a little bit there. When we see an event that's rolling across the screen, if you remember from part 1, we can set a trigger here and we can hold it there. You know what else I need to do? Let me change this buffer back to 32 just to stay consistent. Watch that buffer. We were just at 50 a second ago. Now we're at 32. So I have 32 frames in here. If I set a trigger, I can hold this here, but I can also do what? I can also pause this, and I can go back and look at my waveform buffer, and we can do that a couple different ways. Up here, I'm gonna be in the way here, but we can scroll back through these, and you see that kind of rolling on the screen. Okay, that works. Or maybe in this application, not so much. Let's set a trigger, and we'll just do an auto trigger. And now I have this picture frozen on the screen. See, at 10,000 samples on this 5 millisecond per division screen, we have pretty good detail still in this primary waveform. I can see the clear lines, clear turn on. I can see my dwell time, top of my spike. You know, it is kind of up and down a little bit. That may actually be a sample problem, this height of that. Pretty decent detail in there. Let's drop this down a little further. Let's go 1 millisecond per division. And I believe, yeah, that's what we were seeing. Do you see the spike, how it's higher now? And it's staying consistently higher? On this 1 millisecond screen, this is a little more clear. Sample interval over here, 1 microsecond. Go back to 5, where I was a second ago. Still pretty good detail, but we're starting to see some high lows in this spike. Let's go up now. What happens if we take a longer time base? With this 10,000 sample screen, if I go 100 milliseconds per division, look what we have. What was good on that lower time base is no longer good on this longer time base. Why? Because I didn't change my sample rate. What did I change? I changed the interval of the samples by raising the time base, by increasing the time base. So now we have an issue. You can see it, and I'm really not even triggering off of this anymore. Why? Because there's no event that's consistently crossing that trigger. So it really affects triggering too. If we freeze this, we can go back in the buffer and look, and you see we got plenty of frames now. I can go back and look at some of these events. We're not going to have the detail we had before. And you can see it here. I don't really have to zoom in to show it to you, but if I were to zoom in, let's go on this event. That's not too bad. You see the choppiness in this. They're not as clean of lines. In fact, we start to see diagonal lines here. The other thing is, look how pointy everything is. Let's look at that again. Not as clear. What are we missing? We're definitely missing detail here. No question about it. And I didn't need to zoom in to show you that. See, the lines are not as clean. They're kind of diagonal here. Missing the spike. You can almost see the intervals of sampling in here. It's 100 microseconds. I wonder if I can, just want to try something here. I mean, I'm pretty sure I have a sample there. And I'm pretty sure I have a sample there. Yeah, check it out. You can actually see the sample, 100 microseconds. So I put it at the point there, and I put it right there. So listen, what you need to understand is if there's an event going on between these two cursors right now, I'm going to miss it because my sample interval is too wide. That's 100 microseconds right there, delta time. 100 microsecond interval. That's pretty cool. I think we can appreciate that. All right, so what do we do then? If we want to take longer time bases, we need to consider increasing our sample rate. And while we do that, we need to also understand that we may eat up some of our buffer doing that. Not on these low numbers, we're not going to, by the way. We have to go over 1 million samples before we start eating up our buffer. All right, so this is 10,000 samples. Let's go back up to our default, that 1M, and you guys tell me if we're missing any detail now. Look at the sample interval is 1 microsecond now, and that's on this longer time base. 100 milliseconds per division. Let's freeze this, take a look at one event, and we won't worry about the height of the spike, but kind of focus in this area. Great detail here, right? Where's 1 microsecond in here? I probably wouldn't even be able to put these cursors in a 1 microsecond area. Just give you perspective here. With my cursors basically on top of each other, my cursors are on top of each other, I'm reading 21 microseconds. Am I missing any detail on this? The answer is no, and really what that tells me is I could probably drop my sample rate down a little bit if I wanted to. You might be thinking, why would you want to? Well, if I want more than 32 frames, this time base, if I want more than 32 frames, I have the ability to lower my sample and change my default maximum number of waveforms in that buffer. So when we do that though, do we need to consider our detail? The answer is yes. We still need to have our detail. I always tell my students what we want to have is the best of both worlds. We want to see repetition and we want to see detail. But we don't want to sacrifice detail for that repetition. So looking, especially in an ignition firing event like we're looking at here, there's going to be times maybe where that signal's dropping out and I'm getting a misfire, or maybe we're doing some snap throttle tests and we want to catch that. We need to know how to use our sample rate, our time base, our buffer to be able to catch those events. I think I can simulate that for you, but I think I'm missing one point before I show you that. I want to drop this back down to this 10M or this 10KS, my 10,000 sample screen. And what we said about this screen, this is a horrible sample rate for this time base. But is this always a horrible sample rate? And the answer is no. If I take this time base and drop it back down, let's go 2 milliseconds. Here's the same capture at 2 milliseconds. That looks pretty nice. This height of the spike's not bouncing around too much. Some of the up down in that spike is actually the car and not the scope. But that's a pretty clear picture. I'm not really sure that raising the sample rate would really help us much. In fact, let's do that real quick. There's 10. Let's go to, there's 200,000. And we see that the line's a little bit thicker, and that would make sense that we see more of a thicker line because we're sampling that same spot over and over. Maybe we're seeing a little bit of stuff in here that we weren't seeing before. Let me drop it back down and we'll look. Yeah, we're missing some of that in there. Some of those really fast events, maybe. Still, here's the point. It's pretty good, isn't it? This is a pretty good sample rate for this small time base. So if you wanted to snap the throttle and watch it here over and over again with this trigger, that's fine. The only problem with snapping the throttle on ignition events, this trigger line changes. If this is where your trigger is, you may miss some of the events. That's more car stuff now, not scope. But I guess it's all related. See my sample interval? There's 2 microseconds. Pretty good interval for this small time base. So let's review that again. If we have small time bases, very short periods of time that we're collecting, we can drop our sample rate down a lot and still have good detail. The only downside with short time bases, we don't see repetition. I want to see both. I want to see detail, repetition. So I want long time bases for that particular scenario. Long time base, I need to raise my sample rate for that. So I'm going to show you that on this car. I want to set this to, oh, I don't know. Let's go 100 milliseconds per division. That's where we were. Let's start with that. I'll jack this back up to my 1 megasample screen. And I think I want to go even higher. Let's see what 1 second per division does. This is 1 second per division, so now we're dealing with a 10-second screen. We can see right away, you see the highs and lows in the spikes. We're missing some of the events. So even my 1 mega sample for this many ignition events taking place, I want to raise it. And I'm just looking at this to see when these spikes stay pretty consistently high. That 4 mega sample number might be good. And then so what I do from here is I go to the car And you know, of course I need to consider my waveform buffer, but I still have plenty here. On this long time base, I think I'm going to have 7 if I remember. I'm going to go to the car and do some snap throttle tests, and we'll come back and look at it. This is a drive-by-wire system, so I won't be able to do as rapid of a snap as I like to do when I look at ignition, but all right, that'll be good enough to show what we want to show. Let's pause this, and we need to go back and look at where I snapped it. And maybe hypothetically, sorry, all I did was back up 1 frame. I'm on frame 4 now. And all I did was, hypothetically, I snapped the throttle, and maybe we have a misfire that we're trying to catch. And that would be when maybe we'd want to set this long of a time base looking at an ignition event. I have an ignition misfire that occurs on a snap, and I'm trying to catch it. So do I see the repetition? I do. Do I have enough sampling on this long time base to give me my detail? Let's take a look. We'll look in this area first. So right in here. That detail looks like it's going to be good. Now, picking out a misfire, it's a little bit difficult. You'd have to look at each of these events. So I'll just kind of focus on one of them. And something else I learned about the Pico recently, which, you know what, now's not a good time to tell you about the zoom. Maybe it is. Is it? Well, I guess so, because we're manipulating the signal, we're trying to catch it. I'll tell you about it. There's 2 zooms. There's a vertical zoom and there's a horizontal zoom. So my vertical zoom this way, really I want to open this up a little bit, but did you see I used this guy here when I used the I don't know if we call that magnifying glass, where I drug it over and I kind of zoomed it. That does both, but can I do one without doing the other? I can, and that would be this one right here. If I want to open that up, I can just hit this button right here and open. So I just pulled it apart a little bit. Now down here at the bottom, we can move this over. Sorry, it's backwards. I'm going to move that event. So that's pretty decent that I can see that kind of detail. I definitely have a good sample rate, no question about it. I have the detail I need. There's other things we can do here too. If I wanted to make that smaller but still look at the detail this way, so I want to maybe shrink this or increase it, down here we have a zoom feature here too. This ×1. This is going to be my, we can call this horizontal, my horizontal scales. And what I can do if I wanted to make it smaller is I can kind of do that, where I see the height of that better. It's not off the screen. So that's pretty cool. If you guys want an example of where I used this extensively, you can take a look at my Hummer series that I did. And in particular, part 6, where I was feeling my way through in-cylinder pressure transducer testing, and I really used these scales a lot, and really didn't even know those were there for as long as I've been using the scope. So that's pretty cool, this horizontal vertical scaling. From here, what we can do is, you know, I can't do it up here. This is way too close together. I would need to use my mouse on my keyboard. And then what I can do is I can drag this, and as I drag this line, I can move this. Or we can just do it down here. We have the ability to move it left and right by the buttons here, or we can actually take this guy, and it's kind of tough to do on the smartboard, but I can move it here, and we can look at other events. So I don't think that's too much. I think it's all important. If you want to go back and look at your buffer, you need to know how to change your vertical, horizontal scales, get that picture where you want it, and you know, maybe hypothetically, let's say this event looked like this during your misfire. You know, what do we say to ourselves with that misfire? that looks like a lean misfire to me. I'm going to go toward a fuel injector problem. So just an example of where we kind of used everything together, the time base, the sample rate, the buffer, all together to be able to pull that picture out of there. So I think that's good for where we are, at least for me, and what I think is really important as far as a next step goes when it comes to using a scope is what we just covered today, our time base as it relates to sample rate and the buffer. Now, of course, part one, we did the trigger and all of that other detail that was very important too, the time base itself and the trigger and voltage levels and all of that. And I think I'm comfortable with where we are with this. For sure, there will be a part three, and in the future videos, there's other things we need to know how to do, like adding notes and using measurements, our cursors. Also, you know, in the new Pico program now, we have degree cursors where we can do measurements for 720 of crank rotation. That's awesome. Again, if you want an example of that, you guys can check out my Hummer my Hummer series that I did. And again, I was learning as I was going, so don't be too hard on me. The other thing too would be saving files. It's important, putting notes in our files, sharing those files. And then also there's some things in this program that I even haven't talked about too, which is math channels and creating another waveform using a math channel, or maybe also a reference waveform. All this stuff that I did in that Hummer series, we need to definitely do a part three. But I hope you guys liked what I just covered with you as far as it relates to time base, the waveform buffer, and the sampling. And again, to leave you with that comment with the sample, remember, if you increase your time base, you want to increase your sample rate if you want the detail with that longer time base. The Pico is awesome in that we can take real long time bases and we can zoom in on any section of that time base or that capture and still have great detail. So it's a wonderful feature with the Pico. And I hope that answers questions for you as far as the buffer goes, how to use it, and how to increase your number, and then also what eats up the buffer. So thanks for your time. Look for a part three. I promise I won't take so long this time.